Chapter 29, AD 2101. We zoom in on three figures, picking their way carefully through dense brush and stickers surrounding the old house on the hill. Catch it. They're a big drop, Abahi. The lead figure, the one with the monk-like appearance, called out to the others. He wore a heavy cloak of brown leather that hung loosely, brushing against the ground as he walked. An enormous hood concealed his face and enveloped his head like the black mouth of a cave. He leapt gracefully over a muddy puddle and crouched down, waiting for his companions. The two others held hands as they made their way through the tangle. The female, tall with close-cropped brown hair and olive skin, was jerked backwards by a branch that had snagged on her lacy white top. "Shocky!" she shouted, and reached back, trying to free herself. Her companion, a chubby, dark-skinned kid in a one-piece rubber jumpsuit, peered out, eyes wide, through his internally lighted face mask and looked her over. "Laws to hold a hole." He unhooked the branch and tickled her through the rip in her shirt. "Deuce gonna be wrecked, I say," she said, giving him a playful shove. "Hss." The cloaked traveler waved a hand angrily at his friends. "No loud." Never taking his eyes from the house, he pushed back the sleeve of his cloak and tapped his forearm twice, gently. A number of soft white lights glowed under his skin, each about the diameter of a pencil eraser. With an index finger, he traced 3 straight lines upon his arm, then a soft curve, followed by a series of sharply angled turns. One of the lights turned from white to blue, but he continued to focus on the house, seemingly lost in a trance. The other 2 reached him presently. The girl smoothed her flowing peasant skirt and knelt beside the cloaked figure. "You got a thing?" she asked him. "American four squaw," he replied. "Built done approx 1915. I say, I has a bad pipe. Shocky, what's you get?" Shocky pushed up the sleeve of his jumpsuit and tapped his arm. 2 lights glowed pale, a mint-colored one near the wrist, and a pearl light near his elbow. "Naba, pullin' is no head. Probs the whole SG is in doubt." He pointed back down the hill to the dark city below, the buildings only black silhouettes. There were no lights on anywhere, no vehicles moving, no illumination from homes or businesses, no street lamps. "I say, so good for us," said the girl. "But do." With the index and middle fingers of her right hand, she poked herself firmly in the neck, pressing behind the jugular. Her expression went blank for a moment, and she stared intently at the sky. Then she snapped back to attention. "Naba." The cloaked figure shrugged. "So good for us." He pulled back the heavy hood and tapped his temple 3 times. Then he motioned for the others to follow. Though he carried no flashlight or other source of illumination, he made his way easily up the hill. Soon enough they reached the shattered front steps of the house. Broken pieces of brick lay scattered on the ground nearby. The building was curiously free of graffiti, or anything that appeared to be intentional damage, but it was in bad shape, and hadn't been lived in for a long time from the looks of it. They ascended. "Saul, just one," the cloaked figure said to the girl, motioning to the sagging, rotten boards of the front porch. "Rated only 200 kgs now." He went to work on the front door, while his companions held at the top of the steps. Saul shrugged and crossed arms over her chest. "Picky?" she asked Shocky. Shocky struck a heroic pose with hands on hips, grinning widely, and Saul touched her left eyebrow. A small amber light glowed briefly on her forehead, then faded. She pointed to some climbing vines that wrapped every column on the porch and spread out across the roof. Dense bunches of purple flowers, hundreds of them, adorned the plant. "Laws, you pullin' now? What's the fill on thems?" Shocky tapped his arm in a complex pattern. He stared at the flowers, then said, "Wisteria frutescens, American wisteria, woody climbing vine. Toxic pods, seeds. You want an ashet?" Saul made a face. "I say not on this night." She turned to the front of the house, where her friend had begun to hammer the door with his shoulder. "Oh, Georgie Herbert, How about no loud? She called. Georgie Herbert grimaced, then slammed into the door one final time. It popped open, and he stumbled into the front room, nearly falling flat. Shocky and Saul doubled over, laughing, and crossed the porch one at a time until everyone was inside the foyer. It was pitch black inside, but they looked over the space, turning this way and that, taking everything in. Improbably, the room was still full of furniture, a couch, an ancient plasma screen television, books scattered across the floor. There was a small dining table in one corner, a buffet, and a couple of chairs. Cobwebs blanketed every available surface. Saul tugged at the corner of Georgie Herbert's sleeve. "Keddy," she said, and pointed. Stock still in a doorway, with one paw raised and head low to the ground, as though he were prepared to bolt, a thin orange cat watched them. Eyes wide, its whiskers twitched. "Nabahab see in so long," said Georgie Herbert quietly. "Years, maybe." The cat darted across the doorway and out of sight. Shocky tried to follow, but Georgie Herbert stretched out an arm, blocking his way. "Pullin' now," said Georgie Herbert. "Pipe's good a minute. Tellin', then we a-goin'." He pressed his arm, then traced some shapes with an index finger. One of the lights blinked yellow. The others stared off, slack-jawed, into a corner of the room. "At most 90? Toxins nobbin'? So's we're good for a spell." Georgie Herbert raised the hood of his cloak until his face was entirely hidden within its embrace, and laughed darkly, like some old-time villain. "Old Russell, Street 13. Home's the one of Brock DeKalb, 15 mayor of the old Broadacre." He spoke slowly, telling the story with a dark, dramatic flair. "Also resident? One Zane Truax." He looked around at his friends with an evil grin. "You know the names, I say." Saul's face immediately fell. "I'm's a-goin'. Nobody tells me, Saul, what we's gettin' into on this night." "So yous knows who's it, then?" "I knows the Zane's one who carry off thems that wrecks the old city." Shocky interrupted them. "Shocky's not wreckin'. I'm not wreckin'." Shushed Georgie Herbert. "Nubby's wreckin', Shocky." "You breaks the door, Georgie Herbert," Saul pointed out. "Doors catch it. Laws, I catch it. We're here to see only. But you must stay by 3 commands of Zane, lest you gone to be snatched off in the fiery pit. Knows 'em?" "No breakin'," said Saul. "No takin'," said Shocky. "And don't be scribble on them walls," finished up Georgie Herbert. Yeah, now's the Keddy." Shocky was bouncing impatiently. "Telltale we goes," said Georgie Herbert. "Pips the floor's mind, and maybe drops. Scrotted. I on to feed, but one on to reel." With Shocky in the lead, the trio cautiously entered the room where the cat was last to be seen. It was a kitchen, and still fully furnished. Aside from the heavy dust and the webs, and the generally antique status of the appliances, the place was in fine shape. There wasn't even any graffiti on the walls, or broken glass scattered about. Unusual for an abandoned place of this age. Saul, ever a curious one, pushed a recessed switch on one of the ancient appliances. Its front door swung open with a creak. She pressed the side of her neck again, staring. "Microwave oven," she said. "Hits the food with microwaves, excites the water molecules up in." The others paid her no mind. They were investigating on their own. Shocky noticed movement atop the refrigerator. The cat had been spying on them. "There's it!" he cried. The cat jumped to the floor, darted through the legs of the dining room table, then paused at the foot of the steps. It meowed back in the direction of the 3 interlopers. "Wants to go follow him," observed Saul. "Shocky, go," said Georgie Herbert. As they ascended the creaking staircase, with Shocky in the lead, Georgie Herbert continued the story, his lights all aglow. "Zane Truxton, we hear. Right here, these very halls. He's loved this beauty little quail, him's one and only. She's off lives in a Bower Leal house, off over the hills, across the Salamone River. But lady's Pep, he says Naba to Zane, not give him to see his little quail. Because of the quail is light, and Zane's is dark, you see it? They reached the top of the stairs. The first room was some sort of a nursery, with a gaily painted crib and rocking chair that waited patiently for mother and child who would never come again. Toys and puzzles, too, which carried on, not knowing that their usefulness had been outlived. Saul shuddered. This here is real molderin'. Stick off. Naba, 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 she said, and stepped back into the hallway. Shocky and Georgie Herbert laughed knowingly and followed. Across the hall was a bedroom with some personal effects through which they rummaged. A ratty, maroon, crushed velvet shirt was crumpled into one corner. Plastic guitar picks in many colors. Some books of guitar tablature. A musician's room. The room next door was empty, but for the cat who had retreated into a corner, back arched. Shocky approached it, arms outstretched. Keddy! Pat pat! The animal watched him reproachfully. Just as Shocky was about to reach the cat and stroke its fur, it yowled and darted off, streaking out of the room. They heard it pounding up the stairs. Saul rubbed Shocky's back when she noticed his crestfallen expression. Fearin', Shocky. It's wild, Keddy. Georgie Herbert, Saul, and Shocky explored the rest of the second floor, while Georgie Herbert continued his story. So Zane's little quail, she has the sick. The malicious sick she gets. And she's laid up in bed, in's her own house. And still the Pep won't let him come. She watch out the glass gate, days and nights, for Zane to see. Zane's can only see her from afars, 'cause of the Pep have them stormy bluecoat officers all around. Poochin', too. Mean tooth-gnashy ones. The cat meowed, a distant cry. Upstairs. The three began their ascent to the attic. Georgie Herbert, you're just exploding nonsense, you say. Why he bring out the poochin' and the bluecoats just for one little daughter? Said Saul. He had the moochin' for him? Georgie Herbert laughed. Saul, you noodles it too hard, and it's reckoned a telltale on this night. Pep's a loud builder man, and he knows all the bushy townsfolks. Go, Georgie Herbert, said Shocky. Keep the telltale. They had reached the top of the stairs and the closed attic door. Georgie Herbert turned the handle and pushed. It swung open with some effort, scraping across the floor, as though something were blocking it from behind. Here the explorers found the ceiling was beginning to cave. A pile of broken wood, insulation, and roofing tiles was swept aside by the door's arc. From inside, the cat watched them enter, then leapt gracefully onto a creaky, wrought iron bed on the far side of the attic room. A shaft of moonlight from a window behind illuminated the creature perfectly, as though it were a performer on the theater stage. The attic was full of furniture and personal items, just like the rest of the house. A large wall mirror, a chest of drawers, writing desk, a trunk, chairs of all types. The cat curled tail around its feet and watched the group suspiciously as they poked through the collection. Shocky knocked over a large oil landscape painting that raised a cloud of dust and made him choke violently for a minute until Saul pounded him on the back. The cat looked on disapprovingly. Let that arty paint back up and dub a time, Georgie Herbert hissed. Saul lifted the painting and leaned it back against the wall gently. It didn't seem any worse off for the fall. Finna telltale, Shocky said between coughs. He pulled back the face mask and wiped his teary eyes. Georgie Herbert smiled and lowered himself into a ratty plush armchair. Wheeze, it's a sad, lonesome telltale. The little quail, she dies of her sick. Pep sends away all poochin' and all them bluecoat and moves off. But Zane go to his one and only's house to see if he can find her ghosty spook. And he does. Shocky's arms wrapped Saul tightly, the pair staring off into a corner of the room, eyes tracking left and right, as though they were watching something projected on the wall. Shocky trembled a bit. Even the cat seemed lost in the story. Georgie Herbert noticed this and smiled. His voice seemed to deepen further and slow. He was relishing the telling of this tale. That ghostie looked just like Zane's one and only. He 'lowed to hole her again, but passed through just like slosh. Ever they can speak to each. Leetle Quail says, comes back and see, every day earn. And he do keep it. Sol and Shocky were looking into each other's eyes, smiling, until Georgie Herbert suddenly pounded the chair's armrest and they jumped. But F nobbin last. Pep gets wind, gets Abba sick cross, once knocking down ol' house. Keep Zane far off a Leetle Quail's ghosty spook for all times. A light in the middle of Georgie Herbert's forehead began to blink, a deep crimson pulsing. Zane rip-run to the ol' house, tie himself on it. Big metal masher roll up. Pep's the builder man noodle it. Ghosty spook a whippin' in a winder up top. Big metal masher get close. Ghosty spook wailin' like a twisty. Zane, he say, yez can smash down this ol' house, and not yez happen see the last of Zane. I 'low we's be together for all times. Zane and his one and only. Metal masher getting so close now, and Pep's looking wild-eye. He just go and go, not by holding that's back. Zane calls out, runs me down and I curse blight you, and all the whole town, a curse blight, for always and ever. Anyhows you smash down some old pile, or wreckin' some ghosty spook house in your buildway, Zane's find you, I sees it. All's it scribblin' on dem walls, I sees it. All's it stealin', takin' to old goods, I sees it. All's it breakin' windows, breakin' lights, breakin' de walls up, I sees it. I lives in all de ghosty spook old houses now, and I, Zane, will down drags you to the fiery pit on this night. Abba the old Pep, he aren't care. Close, and close, and then shabow. Metal masher run down Zane, and run down ol' house, and ghosty spook is gone. For a moment it was quiet in the old attic as the story sank in. The cat dozed in a ball at the foot of the bed. Then Shocky spoke. So, Pep kill smashed? Zane Truxton? Georgie Herbert nodded. But Naba alls it. Pep Builderman thinks he win smart. Goes on, till but one day, goes to smash down some other old house. Want to build up a big factory line. And he gets in his big metal masher and shabow! Hits the old house. But only on this day, the whole house downfall and smash hims flat. And all the town folks say they heard Zane, ha ha ha, leffin' on the wind. Sol giggled. Why they bluecoats not kip a hold of Pep after he'd murder Zane Truxton and send hims off to prison hole? Just explodin' nonsense, I says again, Georgie Herbert. Georgie Herbert shrugged. Don't hear my nonsense, Sol. Go scribble on them walls and see how you go. Sol looked around the eerily untouched room. It could have well been just as it was left by the prior owners decades ago. No one had dared vandalize the place. Everyone in the area knew the legend. She looked back to Georgie Herbert and smiled, a bit uneasily. Shocky piped up. I hears 2 kids dem breaks in, wreckin' it, paint on old library in downtown. Falls in scrotted floor hole, never finds dem bodies. So many telltales about in town, Shocky, said Georgie Herbert. Something caught Sol's eye, and she walked over to the corner of the attic. The edge of a roll of blue plastic poked out from behind a bureau. She dragged it out, unrolled it. It was a long vinyl banner, stiff and cracked and splotched with yellow paint. Vote DeKalb, 2002. A mayor for the past, present, and future. See, said Georgie Herbert. Mayor live here. Zane Truxton live here. So many ghosty spooks. You think anyone's can recall 3 of us, after we pass off, the way them's recall these? Asked Sol. Georgie Herbert shrugged. Effins you noodle a ways to live for always and ever, little Saul. He and Shocky watched Saul roll up the banner and replace it behind the bureau for any other explorers that might someday follow in their footsteps to find. The cat had gone away while their backs were turned, and now it's time for us to go away too. Zoom out from the window and away we fly, away from the house, away from Salamone County, and from Indiana, and from the earth, out past the farthest reaches, and out to the dark, quiet space on the edge of the universe. It was the end of this story. Watching them all go was bittersweet, but we weren't sad, because there was still so much more to see.